Hello, everybody. This is your host, David Mason, and welcome to this presentation of the CARE model of performance management, or how most companies have failed Performance 101. What I'd like to do is I'd like to start off by playing a little game. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some neutral statements, and I want you to tell me if they're truly neutral or if, perhaps they're taken typically good or bad. So, starting off, we need to talk. Now, when you hear that one, are you always like, "Oh yeah, awesome, we need to talk," or is it pretty typically, "Oh geez, great, what did I do now? What's going on?" Yeah, it's almost never positive, right? That's a pretty consistent warning sign. Okay, come into my office, close the door. Oh my gosh, I don't know about you guys, but literally every single time I hear that, I'm like, "Well, I guess I'll go get a box and pack my things. Today's the day I get fired." It could be anything. I could be like getting a promotion or something, and I'm always gonna think, if you say it that way, I'm gonna think the worst. What's that smell? Typically, that one's gonna get me as well. If I'm on a bus or a train or in an office and someone says that, unless we're expecting catering, I'm gonna be like, "Oh my gosh, I swear I put on a clean shirt," and I will immediately start taking the blame for that one. Did you forget to? Now, here's a little secret about me. Anytime you want to get my goat, you say that, and I will immediately panic. I will start thinking, "Oh man, did I leave the oven on? Did I leave the faucet on? The sprinklers? Pick up the kid?" Man, I'll tell you, I forget a lot of things. And so you start that sentence, I'm going to again assume the worst. I probably did forget to. Now, if you have any others like this, by all means, let me know because I love collecting these and I'll add them to future presentations. But here's the one that I'm really going for. You tell me, when someone comes up to you and says, "Hey, can I give you some feedback?" How do you take that? Are you like, "Oh, hey, awesome, feedback's a gift, right?" No, no one does. We always assume the worst. We're like, "Oh, here we go. This is someone who's tactfully trying to complain about me to my face right now." So why? We should be happy for feedback. It's a gift, right? It's helping us get better. So why don't we? And it's really because it's been co opted by people who use it as a nice way to tell you what you're doing wrong. It's basically the "we need to talk" of the business world, which means that if a company's performance management strategy based around feedback is going to have some major hurdles to overcome. And the first one's going to be that performance management at most companies I've ever been to is, at best, a painful obligation, an annoying hoop to jump through that doesn't actually benefit anyone, but is the price you pay to get your raise at the end of the year. There was a People IQ study a number of years ago, 50,000 people they studied, and guess how many people thought the review was ineffective? 87% of the 50,000 managers' employees thought that performance reviews are ineffective. So why do we do them? Well, and what's even crazier, 94% of the CEOs in the survey also thought it was ineffective. Like, think about that. How many other things can you think of that 9 out of 10 people think are a waste of time and bad for us, and we do them anyway? The only thing I can think of off the top of my head is maybe resting your eyes after you turned off your alarm in the morning. But at least that feels good. And in an earlier study, back in the 90s, Kluger and Denisi found that often it was actually worse. That things actually started damaging the company. It made things worse somehow. A TriNet study from just 2015 found that about 50% of people leave reviews feeling like they can't do anything right. Even if there was positive stuff in there, people just said, "Nope, it's the worst thing possible. I hate these." So, right now, many companies have performance strategies that are actively damaging their company, wasting time, wasting money, demotivating people, and hurting employee engagement, hurting the bottom line by focusing on behaviors and goals that don't result in better performance. So, I'd say this is the first thing I want you to remember, but honestly, the very fact that you're in this presentation right now probably means that you already agree performance management is the worst. Now, at this point, most companies would probably be happy to just be business neutral. We may not be world beaters, but at least we're not slipping backwards down a hill. But let's say you wanted to be a world beater. Let's say you want to rise above that business neutral. Let's say you want to actually create benefit from your performance plan. Well, performance is where you start because every people problem, and even some operational ones, depends on having a good performance strategy. So how well could you run your business without people? You just couldn't, right? It's the key. It's the lifeblood. It's what keeps it going. Think of it like a house. If a house has a bad foundation or bad framing, can you still make the house look good? Yeah. Could you live in it? Honestly, sure. But it's definitely not going to stand up to stress. What would that look like in the business world? That'd be like market forces or leadership changes or, I don't know, pandemics. It's just going to fall apart. And, it just might fall apart anyway, honestly, because it's all put together by twine and straw. Have you ever seen a wall where it's been so patched that it's just honestly more spackle than drywall? A fender on a car that's mostly just Bondo and duct tape? You need a solid foundation. And if you have a good one, you can make some real headway as a company. But what I just described is still very company focused. It's definitely adding value. As you can see, it's above business neutral. It's adding value, but it's very company focused. The company reaps the reward, and really for the employees, it's mostly just, okay, well, at least I wasn't annoyed by the process. But what if you could actually craft a performance strategy that didn't just benefit the company, but one where your employees were looking forward to it, one that helped your recruiting and your retention, one where your employees say, I would never leave here because where else am I going to find performance appraisals and reviews that are this fulfilling? If you can accomplish that, can you see the possibility? Now, here's the problem. I can actually hear you laughing right now because let's be honest, that's absurd, right? No employee would ever say that because let's not forget the first thing we learned, performance management is the worst. But it doesn't have to be this way. So what does a good strategy look like? I want you to think of it like a balance scale. There are certain things people want out of their performance process that will tip the scales from poor to good. Now, I know there's a lot of articles and blogs and videos that are going to tell you what people want, and they're not wrong per se. You won't be led astray if you listen to that because it's mostly good advice. But what I've found through my own experience and research with focus groups and interviews, that the number one thing people want out of their performance management process, performance reviews, appraisals, everything, is fairness. Some people feel like they're being treated by managers better than others or worse than everyone else, right? Like the manager has it out for them. The grading criteria are unfair and you're not capturing the real value I bring. Or maybe the scale is unfair and everyone's getting lumped into the same bucket regardless of the actual output, right? Have you ever seen that performance reviews? Everyone exceeds expectations. Well, no, they don't, or you have terrible expectations. The timing is unfair. And so you don't remember what I did 7 months ago, so on and so forth. If you can provide that, you can start tipping the scales into the positive. Fairness. The next one that comes up the most, in my experience, compensation. Hey, listen, I'm worth more than I'm getting paid. Or that person should honestly be getting paid less than me because I'm better. So, give me a raise or don't pay them as much. I'm not getting anything for doing this performance review, so why should I even bother filling it out? I know it's not going to result in a raise or anything. It's not even clear what behaviors result in more money, and so you just seem to give out raises arbitrarily. So why should I do any of this? I need it to be clear and fair and so on. And in fact, if you look at it, a lot of the complaints around compensation are really just more complaints about fairness. Most of your employees aren't working for the company as a hobby. So it's important to really provide clarity, transparency, and fairness around compensation desires. Most of the time, people won't complain about money if they feel they're being treated fairly. The next one I found is growth. Most people want to grow. Now, I just saw some of you catch your breath because that might be a pretty spicy take, but I swear it's true. It's hardwired into us. Now, you're definitely going to find some people who legitimately don't want to grow. They just want to put in their time and go home. They don't actually like anyone there. Maybe they're 2 years from retirement, and so why bother, old dog, new tricks and everything. But no joke, that's the exception. Your brain is constantly creating and destroying neural pathways. It's learning, and you can't even help it. Think of it like a seed. Seeds don't choose to grow. It's a biological imperative, but it still depends on the environment. Good soil, enough nutrients, water, sun, etc. to really flourish. Take any of those away and you're going to stunt the growth. Same with us. So most of the time, if you find someone who says they don't want to grow, it's for some other reason, like fear. If I try and I fail, what does that mean about me as a person? Well, by the transitive property, that means I'm a failure. And my self-worth, honestly, just can't take that. What was it? I was on The Simpsons. Homer Simpson said, "Kids, you tried your best and you failed miserably. The lesson is never try. So maybe they fear hurting team dynamics. Have you ever been really good at something and other people hold you back because you're making them look bad? The nail that sticks up gets pounded down, right? Or honestly, let's just be honest, logic. How many of you are super good at something like Excel, but you'll never tell anyone because now suddenly you're the office guru that everyone comes to for spreadsheet help, which is gratifying, sure, but you've got stuff to do, and you're sure as heck not getting paid to do other people's work as well. So that's what we call a business decision. So the point is, most people want to grow unless something has gotten in the way to prevent it. So you should probably make sure that your performance management process isn't one of those things. Lastly, recognition. We just talked about self-worth and ego. Who doesn't want to be told that they're doing a good job? We might all want that in different ways. Some people want to be acknowledged in front of the whole team or company, and if it's in the budget, maybe you could just throw a parade for me. And other people might just want, a subtle head nod and a promise that we're not going to make a big deal of it, and you can just leave me alone. I won't have to talk to people the rest of the day. But we all want recognition that we're doing a good job. We all want recognition that we matter. And performance reviews too often send the opposite message. Again, it's a thing that seems to be hardwired into our brains. We hear the negative much louder than the positive, which is why the feedback sandwich doesn't work. Like the one I'm talking about, where it's like, okay, well, I need to tell you something maybe difficult. So I'm going to sandwich it in between like a compliment, then give you the constructive criticism, and then compliment again. And yeah, that's why it's called a dirt sandwich. And I mean, it's not really called a dirt sandwich, but I'm trying to keep this PG. But putting the dirt between two slices of bread, even really good bread, doesn't make the dirt any more palatable. But if you can make your performance process with these 4 things in mind, then you have a really good strategy, right? Absolutely. Except remember, this is a balance scale, and too often we have a lot of things weighing it down. So, things like maybe it's too infrequent, or it's subjective, or it's too negatively focused, or maybe my manager is biased against me and I have no recourse against that, or my manager's really bad at giving me feedback. There's scores of reasons, and honestly, you don't have to read all the things on the slide. It's too many. But there's a million things that I'm sure you're intimately familiar with, and probably another 20 that you could add just from your own experience. So, what do? Well, our natural reaction is we start taking off some of these weights by tackling any obvious issues, like, oh, hey, it's too difficult to fill out, let me make it easier. Or, hey, it's too infrequent, let me, add some more on there. Or it's too time consuming, let me bring it down so that instead of like a really comprehensive review, it's a single page. And in fact, it's an easy question, and we'll give you that all the time, which is good in theory, but in practice, what happens is all that does is it makes it easier to do, but not more worth it to do. And we all know that when humans are faced with a choice between easy to do, but not worth it, what are they going to do? More often than not, they won't do it, such as litter, or voting, or not cutting me off in traffic and then flipping me off like it's my fault. So we end up with a single page of generic notes and pay raises for everyone, or no one, and you've lessened the weight, but you've taken away a lot of the credibility of the actual review process, and you still haven't balanced it out. It's still not actually helping the company or your people or anyone. There's a ton of weight holding it down, and we haven't addressed any of the things people say that they want. So how much can your employees feel like you care about them when you speak up about wanting something better and this is the end result? They just can't. They can't feel cared about. That's not how it works. So what do? Well, the first step is to have a clear structure. Remember we were talking about like framing on a house and a good foundation? A house needs good bones, right? Well, that's what we need. We need good bones. And this model, the CARE model, provides that structure, that framework, those bones. It's the only way to make sure that your performance strategy isn't hurting your company and your employees. Now, I'm not saying you have a bad one if you didn't follow this. What I am saying is that all good strategies will fit in this model, and all bad ones are missing some component of it. So, are you ready to be blown away by this model? Right? Are you pumped? Are you excited to have the secrets of the universe unlocked before your very eyes? Okay, so the first step is clearly communicate. And you're like, oh my gosh, are you serious? Really? Wait, communication? Like, I paid money for this? Well, yeah, in fact, this is actually the most important piece, which is both the good news and the bad news. The bad news is, and perhaps some of you walked into this presentation kind of hoping for that, is that you're looking for the magic pill or the killer app that fixes everything, the hidden key that you just didn't know about, but when you discover and you turn it, fixes all your problems. And the reality is that this is honestly a lot like just being healthy. The secret to health isn't only eating organic kale that is grown exclusively in Peru and fertilized by only the happiest of llamas. It's not a PX 500 Pilates total body workout gym system. It's eating reasonable portions of good food and moving around. But just because it's simple doesn't mean that it's easy. So here's the good news. It actually is pretty easy. Now, each one of these parts of the care model actually has its own workshop attached to it, and so this is just a quick interview or a quick overview. You're not going to get the full breadth of it just in this next little synopsis, but I promise you that it's easier than we think it is. So, I'll give you a quick little tip on that, honestly. It's when you're writing a job description and when you're holding people accountable for that, you just want to be very clear about the what you want, how you want it, when you want it, who you want to do it, and what the consequences are. Just make it so clear, so simple, that a regular dope like me could walk in off the street and it would be understandable what is expected of me. I could catch on really quickly. I might not be good enough at it yet because I need training, but at least I would know what is expected of me. And don't be shy. Too often when we're writing these things down, we write really broad role descriptions. I need you to contribute to continuous improvement in software development, which is fine. I guess I kind of am making fun of it, but it's good. That's actually a really good performance review question. Are they contributing to continuous improvement? But what if I was also really combative or surly or hard to work with? Too often we leave that out and we only punish people, or I shouldn't say punish people, we only raise a stink if someone is like actively swearing at you or racist or sexist or something like that, right? There's this huge gray area in the middle where people just aren't good team players. So include language around that as well. Now, what's funny is you're probably saying to yourself, hey, didn't you just say that being subjective on a performance review was a problem? How am I supposed to assess something that subjective? Well, fortunately for you, this very next part of the model is assess. Accurate, valid assessment is crucial to your success in this endeavor. We have tons of information on how to assess well. In fact, it's a whole field that you can get a PhD in. And even though you don't need a trained psychometrician to run your program, the unfortunate truth is that most of the time assessments are being created in your company by people who have never even heard of the word psychometrician. So anyone can make an assessment, right? There's no barrier to entry to making an assessment, but it takes some level of expertise to create a good assessment. And honestly, it takes a lot of expertise to make a scientifically validated assessment. It's not easy, and it costs a lot of money and takes a lot of effort, but it's possible. You often hear people raise problems with something like the scale. A 5-point scale can't measure anything, and so there's been this trend to move towards purely qualitative or open-ended responses or scrapping performance reviews altogether. And the truth is that while, no performance review is probably better than having a poorly constructed performance review, a well-constructed one is better than both of those options. And people want to be reviewed. They just don't want to be reviewed poorly. So in those companies, they're all starting to trend back and bring in performance reviews, but they're trying to figure out how to change it now because they threw I don't know, can I say that, the baby out with the bathwater? Like they're doing that. So 5-point scales are actually perfectly legitimate if they're being used correctly. You have to factor in the frequency and the timing of the review, for example. And no scale or open-ended text box is adequate if the question is written poorly. And then even if it is a good question, you have to make sure it doesn't get gamed. A wise friend once told me, if you introduce a game, people are going to play it. That is to say, if you tell people they will be judged on leads or sales, then you're going to get leads and sales, but I wouldn't count on them being good leads, and all your sales are going to be the high-pressure kind that drive customers away. Like, have you ever heard of the Cobra principle? It's this old story of how the British government tried to reduce the amount of venomous snakes by offering a bounty for every dead snake. And it totally worked in the short term. People were bringing in dead snakes and they were collecting the money. And then suddenly some people got like hip to this and were like, you know what? And they started breeding venomous snakes so that they could turn in more. And they actually increased the population of snakes in the area. Which leads us to the next step. We need to recalibrate. Even the strongest expert will continue to hone and refine their assessment, see if the measure's working. Do we need to change the criteria? Do we need to change the questions? Do we need to raise or lower the standard? Are we even seeing value? Is this working? Like maybe it's super accurate, but it just doesn't matter. So that takes us to the final piece then, which is enforcing it so that it does matter. If communication is the number one problem I run into as a consultant, accountability is a close second. So when I say enforce, it feels like a strong word, right? I could have used something like execute, which is so much more business jargony, right? But what I mean enforce. It's a strong word chosen on purpose because too frequently we let bad stuff slide, often because we're afraid of confrontation, and too frequently we let good stuff slide unnoticed because we're too busy putting out fires elsewhere. The CARE model isn't just a convenient acronym. It's named after the foundational principle that needs to be in place, and that's caring. It's in this last step that it's the most important. If someone is underperforming, you absolutely cannot treat it as a burden, because more often than not, their underperformance is the company's fault. Poor leadership or incomplete training or poor recruiting that puts someone in an improper fit, a work environment that emphasizes the transactional nature of the job, like we'll fire you in a second if we feel like it, but we want you to care about us and our mission and really, give us your all, right? Well, no, of course not. If you're not being treated like that, there's got to be some reciprocity. So exceptions are, of course, always possible, but the rule of thumb here is that anytime someone underperforms, first look at any systemic problems and then fix them. So systemic problems like training or fit or recruiting or just maybe some system in place that's getting in the way of performance. Then look at any leadership problems and fix those. Then look at any team dynamic problems and fix those. Then you can start being like, hey, maybe this person just straight up sucks. And then you can start managing them out. And in all that, please don't forget to hold people accountable for positive things as well. We're always so focused on the negative that we've turned accountability and consequences into negatively tinged words, and I'm on a personal mission to reclaim them as neutral. So, it's not the most exciting of missions, but I think it's important. They need to be neutral. If someone does well, there should be positive consequences that are equal to whatever the negative consequences would be if they had failed by the same amount. It all comes back to balance. So speaking of balance, one last thing about this model is that it truly cares. It fulfills all the things employees and managers want out of their performance management process. So being clear on what is expected of you and others is the basis for fairness. And clarity, the clarity of communication, it illuminates how performance and compensation are related, which in turn increases the fairness. Better assessments in that second column means better feedback, which is necessary for growth. Recalibrating the assessment and job descriptions is the pinnacle of fairness. We're seeing fairness for a second time in here, right? And enforcing consequences, i.e. holding people accountable for their good or poor performance, satisfies the recognition requirement and the fairness requirement. So you're seeing fairness a lot in here. And so it makes sense now when I was telling you at the beginning that this was the number one thing that came out of my research, right? You can see how broad and all-encompassing it is. Additionally, it also takes care of all those weights that were holding back your performance management process. Obstacles like, under clearly communicate, disagreeing on what was being measured. Employees know up front what their performance is based on and so can eliminate any surprises. Honestly, the employee should be able to fill out their own performance review and have it match their manager's 100%. If not, things are not clear enough. And whose fault is that? Well, you gotta work on being more clear. That's your job to set it up right. Under the assess column, the problem of reviews being too infrequent, right? It's about 4 weights down. It becomes clear very quickly that annual and semi-annual reviews just don't cut it. And I'll tell you why. Like, okay, pop quiz, hotshot. Answer how well you were doing at your job 6 months ago. Tell me how well you were doing with your family and friends 6 months ago. Is it hard? Is it difficult? Is it too hard to remember? Well, yeah, it is. So we're doing that for people on their performance reviews? It's ridiculous. Under recalibrate, The third column, we see one of the weights. I'm looking 4 down there. How difficult these are to fill out. Well, that one's an easy one to engineer. We happen to know a lot about user experience, so you can tap into those resources pretty easily. Good chance that you have a UX designer on staff already, honestly. And lastly, let's go to that big last column, enforcing. If someone isn't doing as well as they need to be, what are the consequences? Well, there's a couple different things on there for training, feedback training, no goal training. These are all things that an employee and probably their manager most likely can use to get better. Now, this may seem like a lot of work, and I'm not going to lie. That's a relationship we have, right? We can be honest with each other. It takes some effort, but this is why it's worth it. If you've ever watched a house or a building under construction, I'm using a lot of house metaphors, right? I think it's appropriate. How long does it take before you actually see something interesting? Like, oh man, they're going to build something next door, right? And then it's at least a month before you see anything worth taking a picture of, because it's all about prepping the land and flattening it and putting in foundation and connecting pipes and all that boring stuff that you don't get to see. And so at that point, by the time you're done framing, and it's getting super exciting, I can see the shape of it, it's been 2 months. The first half of the whole timeline of putting this house together is spent building the infrastructure. But you have to do it because everything is based on it. Talent development and compensation are 2 really obvious ones that need performance in place. And that's because it's the key for growth and development programs. It's the who deserves merit increases or promotions, or what your salary structure even is in the first place. But it also helps you with other parts of your people concerns, like recruiting and employee relations. See, there's a lot of L's in that one, so it's messing me up. Recruiting, employee relations, and culture. When you have clarity around your job performance, it's so much easier to hire for fit. And if you've successfully turned performance into an enticing perk, then it's going to help your finding efforts as well, because people are going to be knocking on your door. Better performance reviews become the documentation under relations, the documentation you need for terminations and discipline. Although, to be honest, I don't even like that word discipline. That's why it's in quotes, right? I'd urge you to move away from that type of language. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a coming slide. And with culture, a solid performance strategy actually makes a company's values very clear and present. When employees see actual growth, that they can't help but be more engaged. And when they're more engaged, they're physically healthier. It's not wearing on them as much. And so here's the thing. It solves every single one of your people initiatives. It's the basis for all of those. And yet, there's still more. Wait, there's more. Operations. Okay? Companies make money in basically 2 ways. Either better products or better efficiency. And neither of those things improve without having good people working on them. A quality performance management program accelerates that process, and that translates directly to your bottom line. So I'm going to give you 2 examples, okay? All right. So here we see the spectrum of value that we saw earlier, but this time it's reworded so as to be relevant to employees. Employees are typically distributed like a bell curve. So most of your employees should be in this middle category. That's just how bell curves work and how statistics work and so on. If not, then this idea of being too high or too low probably means that your expectations are either too high or too low. Most people need to be in that middle part. Or maybe your comp structure is too high or too low, right? Like either way, this kind of just naturally falls out, and they should be in that middle category. The next most common categories are going to be just on the outside of that, people performing just above expectations or people that need improvement. And these tail ends continue. You see that? I'll go back and do that again because you can barely watch it, right? Boop. That's it. That's just the nature of tails of bell curves. There should not be a ton of people that need significant improvement, and there should not be a ton of people that are considerably above expectations. Because if they are, what are they doing in that role? They should have moved on or moved up or something, right? Like, why would you have someone that's that good at their job sitting in there for too long? And if you've got too many people on the need significant improvement, well, that sure sounds like a systemic problem. Now, to be fair, if you were talking to managers, it sure seems like most of their team probably falls in that lowest need significant improvement category. And when I read performance reviews, I said this earlier, right? Most employees fall in that highest category. And I mean, seriously, everyone exceeded expectations, everyone's a 5, everyone's excellent. Like, that's a bad system if that's where it ends, because not everyone is like that. They should be distributed evenly. So to simplify, what I like to do is I like to think of it more as a value band. So anything here up in this top two are value add. So if that middle part is just kind of like the midline, then anything above that is value add. These are the people that are going above and beyond. You're super happy for them, but if another department ever wants to talk to you about them, you get super defensive because you don't want them to poach your star worker, right? The middle is value stable. And I'm going to spend a second on here because this is the key to the whole model, because everything is based on this comparison. So is this person meeting your expectations and meeting your needs, and if they're above it or below it? And so the best way to figure out how much someone is in this category is to ask yourself this question. Imagine that your employee refuses to grow. Okay? They don't want any more training. They don't want a volunteer assignment. Just nothing, right? They want to come in, put their head down, do their job, and walk away. If they do, are they accomplishing what you need from them? Are they self-sufficient enough that you could ignore them completely and they would be meeting your minimum qualifications? That doesn't mean you have to like it, right? I don't particularly get along with people that are so stagnant. I like people that want to grow and improve. But let's say they were. Let's say they were stagnant. Are they meeting those needs, right? If you're being completely honest with yourself, are they doing what needs to be done, what you hired them for? They don't need to improve unless, you wrote that into your values in your performance plan, but they don't need to improve. And if not, then are they okay where they are? And if they're not, then either they need more training or you have to revise the job description to include what you're missing. Now, if your job description is appropriately comprehensive and the employee is still not yet meeting your value stable requirements, then that would make them a value investment. And I'm not just saying investment because I'm trying to disguise how I really feel. This is not me being euphemistic. Oh, hey, this is an opportunity, right? No, I want to remind you of the CARE model and how we need to stop thinking of employees and management as working at odds with each other, each trying to gain the upper hand or do the least amount of work possible, because that's what we create when we treat each other like that. So imagine if every employee was treated like an investment. How much more dignity does that afford them? How much more pride in their work would they have as they seek to prove your investment in them was worth it? And with this in mind, the benefits of this approach become very clear. Employees become distributed very clearly. So you can see the people in the value add, you can see the big group in the value stable, and you can see some in that value investment place. And so it's obvious which investments are paying off and which needs some more care and attention. This also makes calibrating salary very easy. How many people are getting paid appropriately for their placement? It's designed to look like a salary band on purpose. So as we get more reviews under our belt, the power of the model really starts to shine. For example, here we see an employee that's slowly drifting downwards. That's a neglected investment, right? This is a person who you thought was valuable enough to hire, but they're going down in performance. Is this person losing engagement? Is something about the job harder? Maybe something in his personal life? If you saw a friend who was not doing that well lately, what would you do? Would you give them an FIP, a friend improvement plan? Excuse me, Carl, you really need to step up your witty banter. It's been lacking, and I'm frankly discouraged by that. No, you would seek to help them. So what about this person who just doesn't seem to be going anywhere and they're stuck way at the bottom? So is this person just a bad fit? Like, what's happening over here? Or, in all honesty, maybe this person just doesn't have it. So I'm not going to sit back here and pretend that everyone's secretly a good person and that you just need to unlock the sunshine within them and then suddenly they'll be a star worker. Like, I'm all about giving people the benefit of the doubt and treating every person with dignity and respect, but I'm going to draw the line when someone is repeatedly taking advantage of that good faith. So fortunately, because your performance strategy involves all these check-ins, you have the necessary documentation to move forward with conscious uncoupling or strategic relocation to another company or, whatever you're going to call it. And they will know on their hand that it's coming because they've had so much clear communication and clear feedback up to this point. So, on a more positive note, though, I want to show you this employee. Look at her. She must have been new for her to rise this fast, for her to start off in the investment phase and suddenly just through 2 reviews jump up all the way to value add. So, we probably need to keep an eye on her. She is probably a good candidate for leadership development, maybe, or put her in some growth program, maybe some early career bonuses because she was excelling so quickly. And last but not least, when you start collecting such good quality time-based data, you can start getting into some really exciting analytics. And okay, so I know, I heard it, exciting analytics, haha, that's hilarious, right? It's like the charismatic statistician. No, but I'm dead serious. Okay, so if you overlay financial data over the performance data, you can start teasing out trends that would otherwise stay hidden. And so if you look at this trend line, this green trend line of your profits, does it remind you of anything? Does it look like it's maybe the same kind of slope as that rock star employee? It sure seems like perhaps her role was maybe more mission critical than we thought. Meanwhile, our friend who seems to be slumping, maybe that role isn't as crucial as we thought, right? He's going down, but the profits keep going up. Now, as a caveat, this is such a wildly simplistic oversimplification. I can't in good conscience let it go without acknowledging all the possible confound variables like market swings and direct revenue impact and so forth. And you'd never jump to such a conclusion based on a cursory visual. This is just meant to illustrate what's possible. And, I'm trying to get you excited and pumped up about analytics. And the better data you collect, the better decisions you can make. So that was a lot of information. So I want to give you the TLDR. Here are 3 things I want you to remember and 1 thing that you can start doing today. So number 1, I want you to start thinking of your performance strategy as a balancing act. There are things that you absolutely must include and a million things that can go wrong. So don't just piecemeal fix obvious errors and think that'll do it. Number 2, your performance process needs good bones. If you can't fit your process into the CARE model, clearly communicate, assess, recalibrate, enforce, and overall care, then you don't have good bones. So, third, think in terms of VIB, value investment bands. Specifically, stop thinking of performance appraisals as a bureaucratic duty or painful obligation and start thinking of them as a perk and a benefit. And strive for that. And start thinking of employee performance as either above or below that middle line, that value stable line. Are you getting what you need from them? Not what you want, what you need, and what the job requires. So, and the one thing that you can start doing to get this taken care of today is you can go back and review your job descriptions and your performance requirements. If I walked in, would I know what it takes to be a good employee here? Or do you have one of those really crappy ones where it's like, hey, tell me if this person did a good job? Well, that doesn't tell me if I'm doing what I need to do. I should have absolute clarity that I know what kinds of things are expected of me. Even if I can't do them, I need to know what I'm supposed to do and where I can go to learn it, right? So go back, rewrite those, really test yourself, maybe even run it by someone who doesn't work there and ask them, hey, does this make sense to you? Could you walk into my company and do well enough that you wouldn't be embarrassed, right? Okay, with all this in place, you are well on your way to creating a harmonious and successful workplace. One where employees and managers are on the same page, they're working and striving and driving together in the same direction, where everyone, including the company, is growing and achieving and looking forward to doing it again tomorrow. Which is a far cry from where we stand now, where we cringe when someone says, hey, can I give you some feedback? Let's reclaim that. We want to reclaim feedback. We want to make it ours again. We want to make it not a threat, but a promise. Let's make feedback and performance review something that we run towards. Thank you, and good luck.